So I move on to the second speaker, and we get all the speakers to make their contribution, after which I'll leave the discussion to general discussion. So I'll call on Frank Miller to make his intervention. Franklin is a teacher who teaches both here in the UK and abroad. He has given a series of lectures at Manchester University on the African origins of salsa. So, over to you.
Okay. I've never done a talk like this with people, with the guys here. I'm looking at these faces. I'm usually looking at people standing up because I'm actually a dance teacher, okay? But for me, this display and the talk means a lot. When I first came into and got involved in this project, it meant a lot to me because I wanted to see that there was actually going to be some kind of change in what was going on, some kind of change in an institution which is racist, simple as, okay? And at the end of the day, when I first came into it, I said to these guys, I'm here and I'm here to make sure that they do not go back on the same conveyor belt and go along with the same crap, okay? And I'm very disappointed with the exhibition. I'm very disappointed with the exhibition. For one thing is, I have to think about this. This story is supposed to be a story about people of African ancestry, okay? The story is not about people of African ancestry, and if it is about people of African ancestry, pieces have been put in and decided on what's going to be in there, so we're still being controlled. Okay, so even though we're saying, right, it's about people of African ancestry, it's still being controlled. For instance, if this story was about any other community, you would have people of that community actually talking about what they thought about the preview of it. There was nobody at the preview of African ancestry to report, to say what they thought of it. Only people from the museum saying, oh yeah, how wonderful it was, all the right words. There was nobody of African ancestry to comment on what they wanted, what they put in there. Even though the meetings were supposed to be in there to say what people wanted involved in it. It never happened. It didn't happen. I came into it, I left. And I was called back to continue with the project. Okay, I'm passionate about this project. But the thing is, why I came into this thing is because the children come into this museum. Every school sends their children to this museum. I don't see many people of African ancestry in here today. But the children have to grow up, whether European, whether African or Asian, and they're all learning the same rubbish. They go in, there's some school curriculum to learn about ancient Egypt, which is ancient Kemet they're learning about. So when they go and they come into this museum, it backs up all the rubbish that they see on TV. Okay, so everybody thinks, okay, so at first you have Cleopatra, or you have ancient Egyptians, programs with ancient Egyptians, and these people are light-skinned people with thick locks. Impossible, okay, impossible. Plus, Egypt wasn't actually invaded, or ancient Kemet wasn't actually invaded until about 1700 BC, okay? So what goes on here is that these guys have now put stuff in the museum. The children come along, they see all the stuff that's in the museum. It tells the children, this is who you are, this is who you are, and this is who you are. Okay? Whether they're Asian, African, or European, the children will play together. It's people like, I'm going to say us that are in here, who are miseducated, will continue that rubbish. Okay? The one thing I wanted to put into the display was a timeline. I mean, I walked out of it, but then in the end I decided, okay then, I'll put the timeline in the museum. Could you hold this for me, please? This is a copy, and it's not even a great copy of what was on the timeline. So this timeline, as I'm saying, it doesn't even have as much information on it. This is where we get taught about history, from this point, which we are today, to here, okay? We got Greece about 800 BC here, okay? We have then African history all back here. Nothing was actually going on with Europe at this time, But we have all the pharaohs here, all of African ancestry. And I'm not talking people who were the invaders that came in there, the people that are there today, because everybody thinks, oh, the people that are there today were the people that were there all the time. They weren't. They weren't the people that were there all the time. They were invaders that came into that land, okay? So people like me of African ancestry have to even go and look and see, hang on a minute, where's Egypt? Oh, it's actually in Africa, is it? Oh, wow. Why? Because all the news tells me it is not in Africa. It's the Middle East. It's on the continent of Africa. The amount of people that are in here now and look at ancient Egyptian people and say, all right, they're the people that are there all the time. No, they were invaders that were there. The people that built the pyramids are back here. We have Pythagoras' theorem coming up. Here's the Greeks. The Greeks are around this time. Sorry, the Greeks are around this time. Pythagoras' theorem, how could that be possible when the pyramids are built back here? So there's miseducation straight away. Okay? Miseducation straight away. This timeline, as I've written downstairs, shows a lot of information that will let people think. It's triggers to let people think about what African people did. It wasn't just about enslavement, it's about the whole lot. And we're talking here, 5,000 years. We're not even talking more than 5,000 years. There was stuff going on there. If these guys built pyramids, they must have had some real maths going on before the Greeks. But we're also taught, okay, after enslavement, that's when we learn. I think it's a real shame. And I think all of us in here should be ashamed. I really do. Because you're passing on the same information to the children day in, day out. Day in, day out. You're continuing the racism. I don't care how many talks you have, it doesn't matter to me. You are continuing it. If you know this, if I showed you this, and roll this thing up to here, could you roll it in for me, please? And I put this downstairs. This thing needs to be on a wall so people can look at it for themselves, make their own judgments, go away and study it for themselves and get the information, because the information is out there. But if I show you this and say, all right, well, that just shows what Africa was doing at the time. Does it mean anything? It doesn't mean anything because there's no reference to what else was going on and what people were doing. There was no reference. So downstairs, this thing is folded up in a glass cabinet. It has no use like that. It's folded in a glass cabinet. I was told there was no walls to put the thing on. There's at least 3 flat walls that it could be on. It's about triggering people. This thing was supposed to be about the children, so we don't continue the rubbish. Okay? So for me, the display of the minimum, it was nothing. For me personally, nothing. Because the children would come in there and it would not mean a thing to a child. And any of you, take your children there, whether European, Asian, African, I don't care. That's not the point. Take the children in there and see if they understand anything that's in that room. Because it's there for academics. Academics can understand stuff. But not the children. And it was supposed to be about the children. So it's either you continue it, or you start to look into stuff. Start to look into it and see what was going on at the time. We either change the education system or we continue with the same rubbish. And I want to know, whose story is it? Whose story is it? Is it our story, or is it somebody else's story? There was me and maybe 2 other people of African ancestry that's involved in the exhibition. And so therefore, who's telling the story? Who's controlling the story? If it was any other community, you would have had somebody else there, some people there to talk about what they thought about it. Down to your children and what you teach your children. And I wonder if we're just here for quotas. That's all I'm going to say on it.
Thank you very much. It's very thought-provoking intervention. Right.